Hi everyone, this is Matty Pascal. I'm here with Peter and Logan, who will be the moderator. Today we'll be covering how to adapt your mobile payment strategy as traffic increases online. And I think Peter will be here momentarily, but while he jumps on, just want to quickly touch on what we're going to cover today. First off, thanks for joining the session. I think we're going to try to keep this informative and action-based, things you guys can do leaving this session after this 35 minutes and kind of say, all right, where are we going to take action? Once again, I think retail has had 10 years to deal with what you guys had to deal with in the past year, a shift from e-commerce to mobile as quickly, or excuse me, in-store to mobile as quickly as you had to deal with overnight. It's crazy, 90% in person to pretty much 30 to 70% online traffic. That's unheard of, and I sympathize with what you guys are going through. But more or less, once again, we're going to touch on some key areas. And then we're going to move forward from here. So just a little bit about Adyen. Adyen is a global payments provider. We are e-commerce first. We launched e-commerce about 14 years ago with point of sale following about 5 years after that. We are truly a unified end-to-end platform. Once again, we are largely focused on global platform. Oh, hey, Peter. Welcome.
Hello.
How are you? I was just kind of going over who we are. I'll keep it quick. But we are a built in-house technology platform designed to bring simplicity to payments, be more flexible, be more scalable for our customer base. We've grown 50% year over year, and a lot of that is due to our customer base. I like to brag that 70% of our annual growth comes from existing customers. And why do I want to bring up our customer base? Because payments to us is exactly that. It's payments. It's not one specific vertical. We are vertical agnostic and sales channel agnostic. And I think it's important to know about Adyen and how we think about payments and what advice we'll kind of talk about today. But for example, when we build one-click technology for Uber, eBay gets to use that technology. When we build eBay onboarding tools to onboard their million of sub-merchants, Subway gets to use those digital tools to make their onboarding process that much easier, right? It's using technology, using innovation to be smarter, be more efficient, be more cost-effective is kind of what Adyen's focused on here. What I like to focus on as I'm Matty Pascal. I'm a enterprise sales rep here at Adyen. And the reason I like, selling Adyen and I like talking about Adyen is not only is Adyen perfectly positioned for the changing environment you guys are seeing pretty much overnight, but it's also a partnership-based, approach with Adyen. We build trust with our customers, and then we roll out, optimizations. And once again, that's what we want to talk about today. Peter, if you want to quickly introduce yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I'm Peter Markin. My background is working with some of our largest, most strategic partners. So I've seen firsthand what we can do through optimization. So the takeaway today is really to bring up some interesting ideas for you to talk with your payments provider or with us about doing and to make you look good.
Yeah, perfect segue. So the key objective here is key takeaways around the nuances of mobile e-commerce, right? It is different than point of sale. You had 99% authorization rates in point of sale. In e-commerce, it's just not the same. Share best practices around tools that are out there today that you can turn on that will, increase your authorization, create a better customer experience, and then largely kind of help build a framework to think about these numbers and these tools to allow you to scale and move quickly within this ever-changing environment. So why don't we start where we are at today? And this is, largely what you guys are dealing with. You're spending tons of money on resources to figure out your new IT stack. how are you going to market to these customers, how you can get them to these new sales channels, these new touch points that were secondary or third channels compared to in-store, right? How are you redeveloping your product to engage that customer because you don't have a face-to-face interaction as much anymore? What is, how much money you spend on customer research, right, to develop that UX? Not to mention that UX has been developed, by retail for the past 10 to 15 years. So thinking about that world, marrying it with your world, how will all that work? And then not to mention the last piece of this funnel, which is often overlooked and largely out of your control, is payments, right? So how do you get a stage that you pass that data off to someone, right? And that's what we're going to, once again, hopefully touch on, hopefully share some, helpful tidbits today. So to set the table, frankly, 1 in every 5 online payments has declined in the e-commerce mobile world, right? That is a global stat. It can differ between regions, but ultimately, this is not because of anything you're doing as a merchant or as a brand. This is because of the inefficiencies in the space that we work. These systems are built a long time ago. They're built on other systems, and the value chain can be corrupted. And what we're going to try to do, and what at least Adyen does on a daily basis, monthly basis, is work with you to minimize that damage, right? Because if you think about it from a numbers perspective, if you have 1 million transactions going through your platform on a given month, and you have a 92% authorization rate, and that's not abandonment, this is just clearly focusing on the payment side of things, and you are seeing 92% of payments success, and then 8% are declined. What are those declines? What does that make up? And say it's out of 1 million, now you're talking about 80,000 transactions that are not going through. These are all transactions that you're never going to get really feedback on. They're going to either move on to the next, restaurant, or they're going to not place that order, or they're going to be confused because you don't have that in-person interaction anymore unless you're putting messaging up. It could be written off as lost, but not all those 8% can have to be lost, right? Like $80,000 has a real value, or 80,000 transactions has a real value to it. If you have a $17 average order size, that's roughly 1.36 million that you are missing on a monthly basis, right? And then if we bring that down even farther, what Adyen and what this conversation is going to be about, and Peter will touch on a couple of key things that will affect this number, is grabbing 1.4% of that outstanding number, which is roughly $20,000 every month that you save, right? So it's an actual tangible result. So why don't we dive into that as I kind of set the table and set the problem. Peter, all you. Oh, actually, before we go that, I want to make sure, I did touch on the declines, right? What is that 8% made of? And there's a whole host of those lists. But the bigger ones that you're going to worry about are outdated cards, technical errors, false positives, and occasionally additional authentication requirements. And then once again, what it results in is involuntary churn, higher costs for downgrades, fewer transactions, obviously lower revenue, and then most importantly, a customer experience that was not great, right? So that customer might not come back. He probably will, but he might not, right? Why risk it? So what we want to talk about today are the things that we know that you can do tomorrow that would affect that number. And Peter will kind of take it from here.
Thanks, Matt. So I want to talk on 4 key pillars that I have worked with major global merchants with extensively, right? So the first one's engagement and checkout. Next one is authorization rates. We'll touch on fraud as well, although that could be a full session in itself. And then finally, localization and payment methods, right? Are you localizing your business to convert and maximize your revenue? So let's go into checkout and engagement first. Checkout is really a critical part. You've done all of the hard work to get your customer to your website, to you as a merchant. They've already made the purchase decision, and now they want to check out as seamlessly and quickly as possible, right? So the important thing with checkout is, what's your average checkout time, right? What's your ticket size? Is it 10 minutes or less for new customers? Is it much less for recurring customers? And how does this vary by region and payment type? So think of checkout as a funnel, right? Where are the friction points in the funnel where you see drop-offs, and how can you minimize those drop-offs as they occur. So some successful things we've done is help merchants with reward programs, make recommendations based on order history, current promotions that are going on in that geo where the customer is ordering from are key things in the checkout process. Also, how are they checking out, right? Are they used to a one-click, zero-click fingerprint authentication, right? Are you offering these types of checkout models where your customers are very accustomed to and worth it? Also, the two-factor authentication with a fingerprint or face scan could shift the liability from you as a merchant. So these are important things in the checkout.
Peter, not to cut you off here, but this kind of goes back to that UX experience of what's been embedded into your customer base for the past 10 and 15 years by other brands, right? This is, for example, Adidas showing a in-product checkout page versus going to a checkout screen, right? Allowing Apple Pay to pop up so they can just quickly buy those sneakers on their mobile app without having to go through a bunch of screens, right? I think Starbucks does this well and a few others. And I've noticed as I shop on your platforms, you guys are adapting these apps. But this is, crucial. This isn't necessarily an auth rate, but this affects that auth rate down the road. Sorry, Peter, I didn't mean to cut you off. But
no, that's completely right. Also, the important thing with checkout is what is your provider doing for you as a merchant? So this is an example of our store demo page where we show customers what a checkout experience could look at. This is my store demo. I've added these incredible boots to my cart that I must have, and I'm checking out here, right? I'm entering my credit card information, and we've all done this before, fat-fingered these digits to 15 or 17 digits. Admin will proactively say, this is not a valid card number, please retry, right? If the expiry date's in the past, it'll say, this is not valid, please retry. So these are basic things that we're doing with our merchants. Make sure your provider is doing the same. So what is your provider doing to help you in the checkout process? Authorization rates, the gold standard within payments. A key important metric that we always talk about and we invest a lot of time and energy on. I'll often get the questions from merchants, Peter, is my authorization rate good, right? How does it compare to my peer group by MCC or whatever vertical? And the easy short answer is really it depends, right? It depends on so many different factors, right? What is your customer base? What geos you're operating in? What payment methods are you offering? So really my recommendation is look at your authorization rates as a time series. That's the best way to measure them. Are you improving these over time? Are you addressing important factors that can be fixable in your process? And I'm going to dive into a few different things here. We're going to do retry logic, updater, and network token optimization. So 3 things.
Hold on, Peter. There you go.
Yeah, so retries. Are you retrying when your payment fails or declines right out of the box, right? This is a really important thing, and I'll go through a few examples on how we do this at Adyen and making sure your payments provider is retrying failed transactions. So in the US, for example, we use a product called US Debit, where if a declined transaction fails under, say, Visa or MasterCard rails, we'll try under different networks. So Star, Nice, Excel, other networks to try to make the payment work. We do this on a global basis where we have multiple networks. So make sure you're talking to your payments provider on how their retry logic is working real time. Main decline reasons, right? Make sure you know what are your primary decline reasons and are these fixable, right? Invalid amount is the one at the top. This is a very common decline reason, and it could happen for a number of reasons, oftentimes fixable, right? Maybe you're not offering a payment ported that should be, say, prepaid cards. Do you want to offer prepaid cards as a way to purchase on your platform? Yes or no? Issuer unavailable. This is a classic one. This is where there is an issue or breakdown in the payments chain. We focus on this primarily to be able to save transactions for you. So like I said, what are your main decline reasons? Have you dug into those? Which are fixable and which are not?
Yeah, once again, it's that 8%, Not the 92% that accessible, just the 8%. What can we save on that 8%? So I would pose the question, do you know your decline rate? Can you find someone in your company that does? The idea would be here, just if you don't know it, figure that out, because that's where you kind of have to start parsing out the data. And let me get back up here.
So what does a smart retry strategy do? I think this is really important. We think a smart retry strategy could save around 10% of declined transactions, right? So if you're a merchant doing $1 billion in volume, you have a 90% auth rate where 100 million is failed. Using a smart retry strategy could save you 10 million on transactions right off the bat. That's a really significant amount. Account updater, right? Account updater, I think, is a functionality that you need to have, is super important. There's two main types. There's batch and there's real time. Batch will happen in large files. We're updating expired cards. Real time will happen real time, as it said, at the time of the transaction, right? So if the transaction fails and we want to check with the issuer to see if there has been an update real time, we'll do that with the schemes and allow the transaction to go through. So I guess I have a quick question to the audience, and this relates to account updater. Does anyone know what percentage of cards are lost, stolen, closed, or had their expiry changed every month? Logan, put this in the chat. I'll give you potentially 20 seconds to answer. But again, what percentage of cards are lost, stolen, closed, or had their expiry changed every month? Any guesses?
If we were in person, you would have to answer.
30, 20, okay. These are big numbers. These are good. 7, good guess. 25. All right. The answer, oh, we're getting some more. 12.5, 10. Okay, these are good guesses. The answer is 6%. So 6% of cards fail every month for one of these decline reasons, and this is an addressable decline reason. So good job, Raymond, for answering at 7. That's very close. Hopefully you didn't know that already. But yeah, so these are addressable with an account updater product. So the proof is in the numbers, right? 10% of recovery for this invalid card reasons can be recovered with account updater. So think about this number as you're implementing account updater and trying to rescue failed transactions. Network token optimization. So network tokens are a new kind of tool designed for e-commerce, right? You have the traditional PAN, the 16 digits on a card, and then you have a new product called network tokens. One more question for the audience. What year was the PAN technology developed and used? And the bonus points go to what scheme or card network was this? So I'll give you 20 seconds to answer.
No actual prize, just pride here.
What year was PAN technology developed and which scheme?
Hint, you'll never know because you never see it anymore.
Giving it away?
Giving it away. Ooh, move on.
Pulse, okay, all right.
Ooh, 1950s close, right?
Tori, that's pretty good. You are the winner. That is right, 1950. And any guesses on what scheme?
I think Melissa
there's the answer. Diners. Melissa, you got it. Bonus points for Melissa, points for Tori. Yes, 1950. So the idea is this is very old technology, right? Before e-commerce even existed in the world. So network tokens are a model that is made for e-commerce. And how does it work, right? So a merchant will give us a PAN, and we will exchange it with a network for a network token, right? And this is merchant specific. So then Adyen will optimize based on issuer preference whether to use the PAN or network token in the authorization, right? So this is, new technology developed very recently, not the 1950s. So why does it matter, right? I mean, I think what's the point? I don't care. I just want my transactions to work. And the point is, Matt.
Well, I was going to ask you one quick question, Peter, because
Sure.
What type of merchants are using network tokens, right? This is a relatively new vertical that have been just overnight shift to the mobile e-commerce. Network tokens is a brand new feature in mobile e-commerce. What type of merchants are pioneering this, technology?
Yeah, I mean, so it really varies. I would say card on file, recurring merchants, it's a really important use case. E-commerce as well. So, anything really online should be looking into leveraging network token technology.
Cool.
And so why do you care, right?
Yeah.
What I was going into. You care because the results have been really impressive, right? We've seen close to a 5% increase in authorization rates. And these are with our sophisticated merchants that are implementing a lot of advanced technology to improve their authorization rates. So bottom line, I think talk to your provider about how you can leverage these tools for your
question. One last question. I know.
Sure. Shoot.
I should have said this to the audience. Please ask as many questions as you want. But what out of these three things, auto retries, account updaters, network tokens, what's the level of lift? How should someone prioritize these actions, and then, or I guess, what's the lowest hanging fruit is the basic question here.
Yeah, good question. So I think I would focus on account updater first, right? For real-time account updater with Adyen, there's zero development work that needs to be done. We can turn it on right out of the box for you. So I would focus on your account updater strategy first, then make sure your retry logic is sound and working well, and then finally focus on network tokenization, because that's the future and within payments. So get those first two and then focus on network tokenization.
Okay. So account updater, simply ask your provider or ask us, if we have it, but there's two forms, batch and real time. Either one should be on. If your provider doesn't have real time, definitely default to batch, right? Quick takeaway, can walk away from this conversation, hopefully increasing your auth right away. So on to risk and fraud. Peter, I'll let you.
Yeah, so risk and fraud, and like I said, there's a lot that can be said on risk and fraud. I'm going to touch it on a high level. If you're used to kind of the in-store experience moving online, there's inherently more risk and fraud that comes up. I think the main high-level takeaways here are know what your payments provider is doing for you on risk and fraud. Are they making custom risk rules for you? Can you make custom risk rules? And then finally, what are they doing at a platform level to help you as a merchant prevent bad actors? So I brought up an example on some custom risk rules that you can make. Our risk engine, Revenue Protect, is on a basis of 0 to 100. So, if you have a small risky issue, like say the purchase transaction is in a different location than where the card was issued, that elevates at 1 point. You could customize this, but it's a small thing, not a huge thing. But if the shopper IP is maybe in a different risky country, that's 100 points. So that will automatically block that transaction, right? Conversely, you can add trusted shoppers that are legitimate customers and reduce this score to make it less and allow those transactions to go through. So I think it's important to know what custom risk rules you could do. And then lastly here, shopper DNA. So what your provider doing at a platform level to help you prevent risk and fraud, right? So if we see a fraud attack on one particular merchant, we'll quickly adapt and prevent that from happening on you as a merchant. So ask them, how are they helping me on a platform-wide basis prevent bad transactions?
Perfect. I think I just want to stop here. We showed you two different forms of risk, right? You have your score-based methodology. Now you have your AI or machine learning-based methodology. If you go to market, and once again, this is all about what you can take away from here, not necessarily about Adyen. We have a tool that operates on both scales, but there's two schools of thought. You can go to like a, for a Riskify that is all AI-based, a little bit more black box, don't know why things are being, necessarily decline, but strong, right? Or a certify or a cyber source where it's more just score-based and it's just a true old school kind of methodology. But the most important thing I think here is you guys enter this world of higher risk is knowing your risk reward. And Peter, I think this last slide, if you want to explain, is the most important for a vertical that's just entering the e-commerce mobile world, because you can get overzealous or you can get underzealous, and it's important to understand.
Exactly. I mean, it's finding that sweet spot, and that sweet spot changes over time, right? You don't want to block good, legitimate customers. You also want to keep bad actors out of the transaction flow. So finding the sweet spot, knowing that it could evolve over time, is a really important thing.
So what metrics, if I'm coming into today, should I be looking at to just make sure I'm doing it right?
Yeah, there's a few ones. I'll put it in the chat so people can take it away. But real chargeback rates, notifications of fraud, and versus proactive refunding rates, risk strategy false positives. How many risk transactions are you looking into that are actually good transaction? In your risk strategy catch rate, all right? How many transactions are you catching up front and preventing from happening on you as a merchant?
Cool. So basically, just is don't block the good traffic. If you have a low average order size, know your risk tolerance, but make sure you're not blocking the good with the bad, simply put. So to move on to localization and payment methods, I think throughout this Decode event, we've kind of talked about the idea of digital and how to go digital, and I think it's a huge topic that for the past year has been drilled. So I'll say relatively high level on this, but ultimately it is important, once again, to authorization rates. And this is going to more focus on the idea of you guys scaling, maybe just not US, to Canada, to Mexico, to Europe, to Brazil, wherever you kind of want to go, right? Understanding once you go global, you kind of have to go local. And I think this would be, depending on the way you're set up, but this is if you had locations in Canada, but you had one merchant account for your mobile e-commerce, right? And that traffic was going through your US mid, right? If you were to say, take all that traffic that was coming from Canada and put it on its own local acquiring mid in Canada, you would see a significant increase in authorization rates. That's just because the border's not coming across, the traffic's not coming across border, therefore it's less risky from a issuer scheme perspective. Very simple. Not to mention there's dollars behind that. Local acquiring also lowers costs, right? If you have franchisees in Europe, or if you have locations in Europe and you're using the US or mid, you're not taking advantage of capped interchange, right? Every region has different rules around interchange, around scheme fees. And that can save you, right then and there, that's like a 2% savings just by, the average interchanges, not to mention the cross-border fees that you guys are seeing of roughly 0.8%. It might not be big in your environment today, but if you guys are looking to grow and scale, it could be large sums of money that you could save. Once again, this would be more e-commerce focused, where if you have one merchant record in the US and using that to go cross-border on your app. And then once you kind of go global, once again, it's all about local, it's relevance, using shopper localization to make sure you're serving up the right payment methods, using, the behaviors of that region, right? Do they like to, two-step authentication? Are they used to that? And then once again, more importantly, serving up that preferred method, making sure it's available to serve up, right? I don't want to go too into detail, but if you're the closest region, I think here is Canada. If you don't have Interact in-app, which is a relatively new product, it is, kind of lights out. That is a huge payment method in that region. That's a payment method customers want. Not every region is created equal. Not everybody loves credit card. Not everybody loves debt. And that's kind of this slide, right? Like once you go local, offer, ask your provider. Your provider should know, if it's not us, what that local market needs, right? And if they don't know that, come to us and we'll tell you, because we have 20 offices around the world. We have boots on the ground. We want to make sure that when you are going global, you're optimizing for that region and you're successful. Simply put, I think this is just the value. It's a confusing world out there. Once you go global, once again, you have to go local, know your strategy, and don't rely on credit cards wherever you go. To summarize, I think I hope we were able to give you some actionable steps that you can walk away from here thinking about and internally asking about within your organization, whether those are key metrics, tools that you can turn on tomorrow to drive higher authorization rates, as well as just creating a framework around your strategy of mobile and e-commerce, right? Because it is not point of sale. There's nuances there that have never been before. And that's basically what we wanted to share with you today. So we're hoping, I think we have about 10 minutes left. We can do some Q&A.
Matt, can you go back one slide?
Yeah. This one?
Yep.
Okay.
Holly, we could share this with you if you'd like as well. I know the font's a little small, but.
Sorry, Holly, I missed that chat. Yeah, we can definitely share this. Anybody else have any questions? I mean, we covered a lot at a high level and tried to get in detail where we needed to. Oh, Kevin, there's Logan. Take it away, Logan.
Yeah, just for instructions here, I just posted in the chat as well. But if you'd like to share live and come into the room, the virtual room, please request to share audio and video, and that's in the top right-hand corner of the screen. Or if you feel more comfortable, just type it out in the chat itself. So I think, did you answer the question from Kevin already, or?
No, I think we could address that.
Great.
Yeah, so definitely great question, Kevin. I think this is really important. Why are authorizations matter, or why are they important? Because they're the key metric within payments, right? That is how transactions go through, how you get paid as a merchant, and you show your conversion funnel, right? So it's the key metric. It means payments are working, they're going through, you are getting paid, and your shopper has a great experience in the checkout process. Does that answer the question at a high level? Happy to answer any follow-ups if you have it.
And I think to circle back around, if you're coming from a point-of-sale world, authorization rates were guaranteed pretty much, right? It's a terminal in person. With e-commerce, that is not the case. There's so many ways they can just drop off. Abandonment is a huge issue within, this world. But under abandonment, once again, is that authorization rate, which, Peter clearly detailed out. It translates to dollars. And that's the only thing that, sometimes matters. And that dollar actually translates to a customer experience. If you get a decline, or I have to re-add my payment method, or I have to, I can't find my Apple Pay, but I'm driving, right? Like, these are things that are experiences that are not great. But if I put my credit card in, I know it works, but I get a decline from your site or your app, that's frustrating. So those are, some of the things that we've heard from our base. What about acceptable fraud rates? So, Logan, you got this.
Yeah, let's see. So I know it's industry. I think it's Tori's question that is next, right?
Yep.
No, it's industry dependent, but would you put an acceptable fraud rate as food and bev? What would you put as an acceptable food, authorization rate or fraud rate?
That's a tricky question. Right. I know it's interesting, but what would you acceptable fraud rates? I would decline to answer this because I don't want to steer you in the wrong way. Peter might have a better answer than I would. Ultimately, what we'd probably do is say, let's get in front of our risk team to kind of understand, where your appetite is and what questions we can ask you. Because to be honest, this is a calculation you have to do, Tori. This is how many chargebacks can I take before it becomes a problem with my, my metrics, my financial metrics, right? Because I think in your world, what we see, the McDonald's and Subway is willing to take on more risk because you're losing, a $12 average order size, right? You want to be more risk averse because the downside is less. Where with a Tory Burch or a Louis Vuitton, they're going to crank that up, right? First of all, they're international, they're in random markets, and every region is different, so they're going to have different, but at the same time, they can't afford to lose one bag because they're not going to, get that back, and that bag can be $20,000, $10,000. So in my mind and what I've seen, the appetite for risk within the QS world has been relatively high. Chargebacks haven't been necessarily an issue, but, card testing could be eventually, but ultimately, you should be more risk averse. I hope that will answer the question.
Yeah, I'll just add on. I mean, I think it's very merchant specific, but say if you're in the credit card world, Are you getting notifications from Visa on the Visa fraud monitoring program, right? Are you getting notifications from MasterCard on the ECP excessive chargeback program? Feel free to take a look into those. And if you're not getting notification of that on those, that's a good thing. But as long as you're staying under those thresholds, that's a good base for you to be comfortable with.
I'm going to say something real quick. Anatoly, I'm sorry, I don't know how to make this slide bigger, but I will. We can share this with the group, or we can drop figure out how to drop this slide in.
Yeah, you have to double click on the actual frame itself, and that'll enlarge the slide to no longer see faces, but just see that one slide.
Is that good? That work?
Yeah, it's all good on our side. Yeah.
Sorry for my.
So just double click on that frame. Yeah. We have another question from Holly. There's actually two questions from Holly. Roadmap for acquiring. I actually will just jump in and say we do have some tentative plans. I'm not sure if we can share that here in the open venue, but if you'd like to ping one of us or just adyen.com, we can try to answer those questions around where our future roadmap plans are or where we're investigating having more acquiring. Holly had a second question, similar to Tori's question. What is the acceptable risk for luxury handbags, sunglasses in China? Can you explain how risk tolerances vary by market?
Peter, I'm not a risk expert. Do you want me to
Sure. I mean, I think it's honestly best, Holly, and we can connect offline on this, but by region, by product line, it really varies. So let's connect offline and see what might be possible.
Yeah, because when we say region, you think about the different payment methods there, what those risk tolerances are, right? There's a lot of, that's why our rule base is so significant, right? Because you have to tweak things. But yeah, I think if you are interested, love to set up a conversation with our risk team to kind of dive into anything you want to touch on that's more in depth. Anybody else?
Call for questions here. Wonderful. I believe that's all the questions, guys.
Well, we appreciate everybody joining. Thank you for your time.
Awesome. Thanks very much.